Hello, we're glad you're with us today for behavior data entry for students with disabilities. My name is Stephanie Ernst, and I'm a consultant in the Early Learning Unit in OSIL.
Hi, my name is Amy Patterson, and I am the Special Education Data Manager for OCL.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Turner, and I'm a consultant with NOCL.
So these are some uses for this training. This training can be used in a lot of different ways. It can be used for independent review for just districts to look at their behavior practices, and this will provide some guidance. There's a lot of good behavior resources in this training, so the teachers can gather behavior resources from here. District staff training for behavior documentation. If a district has a corrective action plan, this can be used for training with the approval of the K-to-E CAP lead. And then this also clarifies expectations around behavior documentation. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to talk about some resources, some discipline guidance. We'll talk about manifestation determinations, and we will also talk about behavior data entry.
In 2022, OSEP released a discipline package that included a Dear Colleague letter. This Dear Colleague letter, quoted on the slide, emphasized the need for states and districts to reflect on their discipline practices to ensure that all students with disabilities are served appropriately and equitably.
These are some resources that we are going to talk about. So let's start with data resources. The first link is Individuals with Disability Education Act Discipline Guidance that was released by the Office of Special Education Programs in the U.S. Department of Education. This was released in the summer of 2022, and this really is the basis for all the work we do around discipline. The behavior data standards are on KDE's website, and this provides information about how to enter information in the behavior tab in Infinite Campus. The Special Education Reporting Manual is a guide for all reporting, in this case specifically around discipline and behavior, and it talks about how we collect data and report it for federal reporting. The Special Education Resources for Using Infinite Campus website has a plethora of information for using Infinite Campus with special education, and that's where this video will be housed. The Office of Special Education and Early Learning webcast, the discipline procedures, is a really good video. It was a superintendent's webcast that was released by Dr. Greta Hilton, our Associate Commissioner, and it's really helpful with explaining to administrators how to deal with discipline procedures around students with disabilities. And then, of course, there's the KDE Safe Schools Data Collection and Reporting website.
While we're still talking about resources, some for early childhood education is the pyramid model. The pyramid model is a framework of evidence-based practices for promoting young children's healthy social and emotional development. When you look here, we look at behavior strategies, and then there's a whole piece of resources that looks at providing support before behaviors occur so students can learn strategies to cope. The same goes for the teachers. We look at the effective workforce first, and then you can see that there's a tier strategies in place. Additional pyramid model resources can be found at NCPMI, that National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. There you'll find so many resources that you'll dive into, looking at those intensive individualized intervention strategies, some general considerations, understanding positive behavior supports in preschool, partnering with families, trauma-informed practices, and those steps of that IPBS, that individualized positive behavior support.
OCL also has a resource hub for behavior resources. This page, which is OCL Behavior Resources, is designed to support educators in strengthening behavior and classroom management strategies. You'll find 6 key areas of support, and on the right side of the slide, you'll see a QR code. If you scan this, it will take you directly to the resource site, or you can also click on the link. We'll start this presentation by reviewing the discipline procedures under IDEA. We'll cover concepts like change of placement, manifestation determination, and services during removals. So let's start with change of placement. This occurs when a student is removed for more than 10 consecutive school days, or when a series of removals creates a pattern. Factors include the total number of days, similarity between behaviors, and proximity of incidents. Remember that determining a change of placement is the responsibility of the district, not of the ARC. And formal removals, like sending a student home early or an in-school suspension, can also count as disciplinary removals if they disrupt access to the curriculum, services, or peer interaction. If all 3 conditions that you see on the screen are met, then these would not constitute a disciplinary removal towards change of placement, but they should continue to be documented in Infinite Campus, along with a description of how those 3 factors were met. Next, let's talk about manifestation reviews. Over the next few slides, we'll answer 5 key questions. We'll talk about what an MDR is, when it's required, what happens if a behavior is determined to be a manifestation, and what if it's not, and what actions should follow each decision. A manifestation determination is a review conducted by relevant members of the ARC. During this review, all relevant information is reviewed to determine if the conduct that gave rise to the violation of the Code of Conduct was either A, caused by or have a direct and substantial relationship to the child's disability, or B, if the behavior was a direct result of the LEA's failure to implement the IEP. It should be documented that both of these were reviewed during a manifestation meeting. A manifestation determination is held each time that a child is removed for more than 10 consecutive school days, and each time that the LEA determines that a series of removals constitutes a change of placement because of disciplinary removals. If the team determines that the behavior that led to disciplinary action is a manifestation, the ARC must conduct or review an FBA, create or update a BIP, and return the student to their previous placement unless otherwise agreed. It's also important to remember that if the removal is for weapons, drugs, or serious bodily injury, the student may remain in a determined IAES for no more than 45 days, whether the behavior is determined to be a manifestation or not. If the behavior is determined not to be a manifestation, standard discipline may be applied in the same manner and for the same duration as it would be for students without disabilities. The student must continue to receive educational services, and the ARC may consider reviewing an FBA or a BIP as appropriate. So when should LEAs conduct an FBA and create or update a behavior plan? We know that an FBA must be conducted if one has not been done before for all grade levels, including preschool, if a student's conduct is determined to be a manifestation of a student's disability. It's also important for the team to consider reviewing and updating FBAs and BIPs as appropriate if a student's behavior is found not to be a manifestation to prevent the behavior from recurring. When removals have totaled 10 or less school days, educational services are required to be provided to the extent that they are provided to students without disabilities. Beginning on the 11th day of removal, the LEA must provide services to students with disabilities to allow the student to continue to make progress towards meeting their IEP goals. This occurs whether a change in placement has occurred or not. Before we move on to data entry, let's pause and reflect. Take a moment with your team to pause the video and review the guiding questions on your screen.
Now let's talk about entering behavior data in Infinite Campus. It's important to remember that this includes preschool. This is for ages 3 through 21. So again, behavior data entry starts in preschool. So it's required to report ages 3 through 21. This provides supports for students. It allows early provision of supports as needed. It also helps support teachers and administrators, both in preschool and as the student moves forward into kindergarten. These are some terms we are going to be discussing today. The first one is behavior resolution. The resolution explains what happened after the behavior event occurred. So was the student removed from their regular setting? Was the parent called? Was a student given an after-school detention? Did they get an in-school removal? So this behavior data reporting from other offices tends to focus on the event or what the student did. Special education data looks at what happened after. How many days was the student removed from the classroom? Or what form of resolution took place. Informal removal is another topic we're going to discuss. This is typically an in-school removal that districts may not think about reporting in Infinite Campus. In-school removal is when the student is still within the school. Out-of-school removal is when the student is outside of their regular school and interim alternative educational setting. So take a moment and pause and discuss with your team the questions on the screen. What are some obstacles in documenting student behaviors, and why is it important to enter behavior data? So before we begin, just remember, it's important to understand that just because you're having to remove a student doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's important to document when behavior events and disciplinary events occur. If a student has an IEP, just make sure you're following the appropriate procedures because that student is entitled to special protections under the IDEA. The main goal that we have is to stop behaviors before they occur. We want to help teachers and students recognize signs that they may be escalating and learn strategies to help the student escalate. So why do we document behavior events? Well, first of all, because it's the law. Here on the screen, you see KRS 158.444. That's the Kentucky Revised Statute. And it says that we must report any events that lead to a removal from the student's regular setting. The second link and picture is the IDEA, the federal requirement to document and collect data for students with disabilities who are being removed from the classroom for disciplinary purposes. A third reason that we may document data, disciplinary data, is because it's really helpful for the district to know what's going on. It's good for the district to see. We see a lot of events happening, for example, in the cafeteria, so that you can provide supports, extra supports in those places to prevent future events from occurring. It's good for the student. This is really good data for the ARC to figure out, look for patterns, look for ways to support the student, and to determine how to make the student successful. So again, we want to be proactive rather than reactive. And the last reason is really just to cover yourself. Documentation in Infinite Campus is a really good way to just say this is exactly what happened when something comes back. For example, let's say there was a fight early in the school year and it wasn't documented in Infinite Campus. Then at the end of the school year, a parent calls and complains, says something about it, maybe in relation to other things that have happened throughout the year. If it was documented in Infinite Campus, it will all be right there. And you can say, this is exactly how we've done it, how we did it. And so you'll have that to look back on. These are just a few things I want to point out in documenting behavior resolutions. First of all, the participant detail. When you go to assign a student to an event that occurred, if there's a red exclamation point next to the student's name, then that means the student has an IEP. That doesn't mean you don't enter this data. It just means you need to make sure you're paying attention to how you're doing this and making sure you're protecting the student under the IDEA. For the resolution, if it's an out-of-school suspension, remember that you also have to mark the student absent for those days as well. The attendance report must show that the student had an out-of-school suspension. Also notice that the duration in school days is actually calculated based on your school calendar, the start time and end time of the resolution and your school calendar. So for example, here the resolution began on September 29th of 2023 and ended 10/13 of 2023, but it was only 5.27 days because the student had fall break in between there. So it takes into account breaks and the start and end of school. So again, just remember, behavior events coded as SSP3 also must show an absence of S suspended. If a parent is called to take a student home, or if a student is sent home early as a result of a behavior event, this must be recorded as an out-of-school suspension, reflecting the actual date and time the student checks out of school. Attendance must be marked as suspension, and the dates and times of attendance and the behavior resolutions must match. This link down at the bottom, the questions and answers, comes from, we have these on several slides going forward, and this is from the behavior, the discipline guidance that was put out by OSEP in the summer of 2022, that provides a lot of guidance for what we do. Data entry, it's important to remember that behavior event codes and resolutions are closely monitored. Make sure the codes are being closely monitored by the district safe schools administrator and in accordance with the district's code of conduct. So what is a disciplinary removal? It's important to know that any instance is in which a student is removed from his or her educational placement for disciplinary purposes. That is considered a disciplinary removal. So that could be in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, expulsion, or an interim alternative educational setting for drugs, weapons, or serious bodily injury, or if a student is removed by a hearing officer to an interim alternative educational setting. So these are the state resolution codes in Infinite Campus. You may have other resolution codes that don't match these and don't map to these, but that's okay. If it doesn't involve a restraint or a seclusion or some sort of removal from the classroom, they may not map to the state resolutions, and that's fine. So these are how we look at the data for in-school removals, out-of-school removals, or other removals. So the in-school removals are an in-school INSR, which is in-school suspension, or SSP8, which is considered a seclusion. The out-of-school removals are SSP1 and 2, which are expulsions. SSP3 is an out-of-school removal, and INDR is an in-district removal. And then other removals would be the interim alternative educational setting. So let's talk about informal removals. So this is an action taken by school personnel in response to a child's behavior, and that action excludes the child for part or all of the school day from his regular setting. And this would be considered an informal removal because they're removing the child from the classroom without invoking the IDEA's disciplinary procedures. And it's subject to the same requirements as any disciplinary removal. So this could include administratively shortened school days when a child's school day is reduced by school personnel outside of the ARC placement process. So for example, if you call a parent and have them come get their child because of behavior reasons, remember that this does include preschool. And other examples might be if a principal excused absences due to behaviors, or students sent home because they're having a bad day, or students not allowed to return to school until a threat assessment has been completed. An in-school suspension, also known as an in-school removal, this is clarified within OSEP's behavior and discipline guidance package, and this is a removal from the student's regular educational program or setting for disciplinary purposes to another program or setting within the same school. And this does include instructional time, but it also includes lunch, recess, and study periods. So for the 3 guardrails, an in-school suspension may not be considered a part of the days of suspension addressed as long as these 3 guardrails are met. The child is afforded the opportunity to continue to appropriately participate in the general curriculum. The child continues to receive the services specified on the child's IEP, and the child continues to participate with non-disabled children to the extent they would have in their current placement. An in-district removal is when a student is removed from his or her school to an off-site alternative program or another school off-site. So this is typically if you're removing a student to an alternative school, or maybe in a district, only one school in the district has an in-school removal program, and if the student is leaving their school to go to another one, for an in-school removal, that is considered an in-district removal. And this is considered an out-of-school removal for students with disabilities. SSP1 is expulsion with services. When a student is expelled, just remember that if a student with an IEP is expelled, just remember the student's ARC needs to meet to determine how special education and related services described in the IEP will be provided during the expulsion. SSP2, expelled without services. Please just don't do this for students with IEPs. It's not allowable under the law. SSP3 is an out-of-school suspension. Typically, a student is sent home. SSP7 is physical restraint. Please just make sure when you are documenting a physical restraint that you document everything objectively, and that you complete the behavior resolution document to make sure everything is being done appropriately. Notice that this is not listed as a removal in the removal types. So at the moment, physical restraint is not included as a removal. SSP8, seclusion. This is considered an in-school removal, and this is the involuntary confinement of a student alone in a room or area where the student cannot leave. This does not include supervised in-school detentions or out-of-school suspensions. Interim alternative educational setting. This is only for serious events such as drugs, weapons, or serious bodily injury. It's only in case of emergency. But in this case, school personnel may remove the student unilaterally for up to 45 days. The appropriate setting for the student is going to be determined by the ARC or hearing officer where the student is placed for no more than 45 school days. This allows the student to continue to receive services to participate in the general curriculum and make progress toward IEP goals. And also includes provisions of the FBA and BIP. So now we're going to talk about what a removal is. So in the upcoming scenarios, there are two things to keep in mind. In order for a resolution to be considered a removal, most of these will be in-school removals, both must be true. Number one, a behavior event had to have occurred. And number two, the student had to have been removed from their typical schedule or setting.
Okay, let's dive into scenario 1. Natasha, a 7th grade student with an IEP, became disruptive during her science class. Her teacher called the principal, who walked Natasha from her class and allowed her to complete her assignment in the office. Looking at this scenario 1, did a behavior event occur? Yes. The student engaged in disruptive behavior as defined in the school or district's Code of Student Conduct. Was the student removed from her typical schedule or setting? Yes. The student finished her assignment in the principal's office. So this is in-school removal. In this scenario, the event is an in-school removal that INSR because a behavior event did occur and the student was removed from her typical setting. Okay, let's go on to scenario 2. Robert, a 9th grade student with an IEP, started to exhibit signs of stress, such as clenching his fists and rapid breathing. His teacher recognized his warning signs and suggested he go take a drink of water and then return to class. In scenario 2, did a behavior event occur? No. In this one, the student showed signs of stress and teacher recognized those signs. Was the student removed from their typical schedule or setting? Yes. In this situation, the student was sent to the water fountain. In this scenario, the event is not an INSR because the behavior event did not occur. Instead, this may be considered an intervention if done with consistency and fidelity. It is important for a teacher to recognize and identify those warning signs a student may show prior to a behavior event, and when possible, support the student in developing his or her own ability to self-regulate. While this response would not be considered a removal for Infinite Campus, coding purposes, the school or district should still collect progress monitoring data on this event and others that are similar. Scenario 3. Angela, a 3rd grade student, became agitated during a group project and used profanity to express her emotions. Angela's behavior intervention plan, a BIP, stated she could be sent to another 3rd grade teacher's classroom following a behavior event. Following Angela's BIP, the teacher sent Angela to another teacher's classroom across the hall to cool down. In this scenario, did a behavior event occur? Yes. The student used profanity, which is prohibited by the school or district's code of student conduct. Was the student removed from their typical schedule or setting? Yes. In this scenario, the event is an INSR simply because a relocation is specified in the student's IEP or BIP as a preventative behavior measure or strategy. That does not change the result that the student has undergone a disciplinary removal under the facts of this scenario. Scenario 4. Jasmine is a 10th grade student with an IEP who is diagnosed as having anxiety and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. During the afternoons, she has a particularly difficult time paying attention, especially when her anxiety is heightened. As a self-regulation strategy, Jasmine's IEP states that she is permitted to request a short visit to the school counselor's office when she finds her anxiety is impacting her ability to complete work or pay attention. Did a behavior event occur in this scenario? No. The student simply requests to visit the school counselor for assistance in self-regulating her anxiety. Was the student removed from her typical schedule or setting? Yes. This is not a removal. In this scenario, the event is not an INSR. In this case, visiting the school counselor is an example of a positive behavioral intervention to prevent the student's behavior from escalating into a violation of the student code of conduct. Scenario 5. Two young learners, John and Mateo, needed to use the restroom after coming inside from the playground. Supervised by the preschool assistant, John was in the stall with the door closed, and Mateo peeked under the stall. John got very upset and kicked Mateo in the face, busting his lower lip. John was sent to the principal's office, where he stayed for the remainder of the day. In this scenario, did a behavior event occur? Yes. The student did hit a peer, which is a violation of the school or district's code of student conduct. Was the student removed from their typical schedule or setting? Yes. This is an in-school removal. In this scenario, the event is an INSR. This is a removal from the student's regular educational program or setting for disciplinary purposes to another program or setting within the same school. John was removed from his typical daily schedule and setting from the preschool classroom to the principal's office. Any changes in placement for the day result in a removal. A behavior event did occur as John kicked a peer, which resulted in the child being injured. School administration or staff will need to document this behavior event in Infinite Campus.
These next two scenarios are regarding DJJ. So a DJJ residential staff may have kept a student in their housing unit due to a behavior concern, and they are not sent to school that day, and no educational services are provided. Is this considered an in-school removal, an out-of-school removal, or not a removal at all? This is considered an out-of-school removal. If the student is removed from the school setting and no educational services are provided, this would be an out-of-school removal. Scenario 7, a student is removed from the class by a DJJ staff for a 15-minute timeout due to a behavioral issue and then returned to class. Is this an in-school removal, an out-of-school removal, or not a removal? This would be considered an in-school removal. And if a behavior occurs and the student is then given a timeout as a response, this would be considered a removal and should be coded accordingly in IC as an INSR or in-school removal. So let's talk about analysis of the Safe Schools report. So districts can be identified as having significant disproportionality for several reasons. So this is how we report discipline to the federal government. We report in-school removals. That's an unduplicated count of students who had an in-school removal up to 10 days or greater than 10 days. Those are separate reports. Out-of-school removals, same thing, up to 10 days or greater than 10 days. Or we do a total removal count. So the first two, we look at an unduplicated count of students. The last one is an unduplicated count of events. There are other ways that a district can be found to have significant disproportionality, but for the purposes of today, we're only talking about discipline. Another way we report discipline is with significant discrepancy, and that is indicators 4A and 4B. And that only looks at out-of-school removals greater than 10 days. So these are just some steps to run the Safe Schools report. So you're going to go to, in Infinite Campus, you're going to go to Reporting, and then Kentucky State Reporting, and then click on Safe Schools. And you're going to run the report for the current school year. In this case, the current school year was 23-24. But you're going to run the report for the year that you want the data for. If you only want students who have IEPs, at the very bottom, you're going to click that checkbox that says active special ed at time of incident, and then be sure all the schools are highlighted. And then you're going to click Run Extract. Or if you're in a large district, you want to click Submit to Batch, and that will allow you to come back at a later date and pull the report, because some districts, it takes a while to run the report. When you click Submit Extract, you'll get an error report. So this error report will show errors that will need to be cleaned up. Typically, that will be the administrators in the schools or the Safe Schools coordinator. Once you've gotten to the error report, click the Click Here button to generate the Safe Schools extract. And that will give you a spreadsheet with all of the entries included on the spreadsheet. So once you click Generate Extract, you're going to go, once you have the spreadsheet, you're going to go to the Home menu, go to the Editing section, and you're going to click Sort and Filter and select Filter. This will allow you to sort and filter the spreadsheet. So these are the columns that you're going to want to look at. These are the student information columns that we report. We report the student's SSID, we report the gender, the race, whether or not the student has an active IEP, the primary disability of the student, and whether or not the student is an English learner. And then these are the data that are specific to the resolution. So we look at the resolution state code. We look at the resolution start date, resolution start time, resolution end date, resolution end time, and then the resolution length, which is calculated based on the 4 previous bullets. So again, these are how we look at the codes. The in-school suspensions are in-school removal and seclusion. The out-of-school suspensions are expulsions, out-of-school removal, and in-district removal. And then IAES is unilateral removal by school personnel and removal by hearing officer. If you have any blanks in the resolution state code column, you can just filter those out, because we don't use that information. We only look at the resolution state codes that are listed in this slide. And if you have any other codes that do not match those codes, such as physical restraint, We don't use those either in our calculation. Resolution length. Review the data for resolution length. You want to add all the resolution lengths together for each student. Any student who does not have a cumulative time of 0.5, like half a day or less, will not be, if any student has a cumulative time of half a day or less, they will not be included in the calculations. But that's cumulative. All the lengths added together. Schools should review their data. You want to look at it together, and I highly suggest that individual schools look at their own data. First, it's easier to look at a smaller amount, but also schools know their students better. So you know if for example, a resolution says a student was removed out of school for 15 days, a school will be able to look at that and know, wait, that's not right. Maybe she was removed out of school for 1 day and somehow something got messed up in the data entry. So it's important for schools to review their own data. If you have an IAES resolution for any student who doesn't have a disability, that is inaccurate, and I will be contacting the district if I see that. And please make sure that any IAES resolutions have to be for the big three: drugs, weapons, or serious bodily injury. This is another way to look at your data. Tableau data visualization. If you don't have access to this, talk to your cases administrator. The OCEAL has paid for this specific dashboard to be developed, count of days removed, so that districts can review their own data or schools can review their own data. So this will provide information about in-school removals and out-of-school removals and total removals for the student, so that you can look and see if a student is getting close to 10 days, knowing you need to go do a manifestation determination review, or if they're over 10 days. This is a snapshot that will be able to help you with that. And you can filter many different ways. You can filter for whether the student has a disability. You can filter by race, by school, a lot of different ways. Please take a minute to pause and reflect now. Who has access to and reviews the Safe Schools report or Tableau report? How do we ensure that incidents involving students with disabilities are correctly identified and reported? And when Safe Schools data shows repeated behaviors, how do we connect that information to interventions like FBAs, BIPs, and tiered supports? Take a minute and discuss with your team. We have provided a discipline training feedback document where you can enter your feedback if you choose, or if it's required due to a corrective action plan. It also provides information or a place for you to be able to ask questions that you might have. So please, if you choose, complete this training feedback form. Some final reminders. Please be accurate in your reporting. It's really important that you're accurate so that the data that we receive at the state level is accurate and that we report to the federal government. Be sure the right people are trained to enter behavior data. Regularly run your Safe Schools report and look for outliers or mistakes. And then use your behavior data to help the school and your district and specific students, and celebrate things that are going well. Work together to tackle opportunities for improvement. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to Amy Patterson for any data specific questions, Rebecca Turner for resources, and Stephanie Ernst also for resources and questions specific to behavior of preschool students. Thank you for your time, and we hope to hear from you.